While Hayley Smith found lasting love with Jeff, Steve's love life has been a tragic comedy.
Oh yeah.
Over the course of the series, he's fallen for unobtainable classmates, older women, really older women, a painting, an alien, his dad in an avatar body, and at one point he even made a girl in a lab and waited until she was old enough to date, only to then care for her like a father. It's as weird as it sounds. So, why can't Steve catch a break? Is it his awkward nerdiness, his dysfunctional family, or does he just have the worst romantic luck ever? Well, to find out, I'm diving into Steve's very messy dating history and asking the question, who should Steve end up with? So let's begin with Lisa Silva. When the show first aired, it wasted absolutely no time in showing that Steve is awkward around girls, because in just the first episode of the show, he does this to the school's head cheerleader.
Ow! Hi, Lisa. Did that hurt so good?
So right off the bat, we're shown that Steve has absolutely no game. Not to mention that Lisa already has a boyfriend.
It's okay, baby. I can handle this.
Yeah, baby.
Ashley was voiced by actress and model Carmen Electra, and ironically, much later on, Steve would almost get it on with a character who parodied Carmen herself.
They're all real, baby! So come and get it!
Yeah!
But more on that later. So Steve is obviously super clueless and awkward here, but he could have been far worse if the original test pilot had stayed the same. You see, in the first pilot, most of the characters were already close to their final versions. Everyone looked and acted more or less how they do now, except for Steve. His design doesn't really fit in with the rest of the family, like at all. It's like he got lost and wandered in from a different show or something. He looked ganglier and oh so whiny.
Think you'll hit puberty before you turn 14?
I hope so.
And thank God they hired Scott Grimes to voice him, otherwise we would have missed out on his angelic singing.
Dad's gone, and I'm not going home ever again.
Steve already struggles with talking to girls. Imagine if he looked and sounded like this.
Today I'm asking out Lisa Silver, head cheerleader and future Mrs. Steve Smith.
Anyway, Steve can't figure out why Ashley rejected him, so he comes to the conclusion that having a dog is the secret to attracting girls. But that idea quickly falls apart because his dad got him an ancient one who is literally at death's door, and then he accidentally shoots it.
Osama, is that you?
Holy Toledo, you killed your son's dog.
After that disaster, they then come up with a plan to stage a fake robbery at the mall with Stan pretending to be a thief who snatches a girl's purse. But Stan ends up being a little too good at it and actually gets away.
Okay, I got a little carried away back there.
Then Stan sets up a date with Steve and Hilary Duff, but that all backfires since Hilary was taken against her will.
Hillary, look out for the mines! What did I just say? You heard me. What did I just say?
You said look out for the mines.
I said look out for the mines.
So Stan's next big idea is to rig the student election so Steve can win. This is so he can become president and therefore win Lisa as a result. And this plan actually works for a change, and Steve gets a date with Lisa.
Go out? I'd love to.
Yes! Oh my God! Score! Score! Score!
Things seem to be going great with Steve. He's class president and he's dating his dream girl, but when he tries to kiss her, she turns him down, eventually coming clean to the fact that she's only really with him because he's school president, and she's not really that into him.
But I'm not gonna kiss you. I mean, I'm beautiful, and you're repulsive.
In a moment that foreshadows Roger's ex-boyfriend Emperor Zing's outlawing of true love, Steve abuses his unchecked power and announces that any kind of physical affection between students will lead to immediate expulsion. Things escalate when he evacuated the school and his parents have to come and help him get out of his mad with power phase. Feeling repulsive, Stan admits that he too was unpopular with the ladies at his age.
The point is, Steve, you'll be just fine, because you're chock full of potential.
Wow. Thanks, Dad.
The one issue left is Lisa, who Steve doesn't want to face again. So like any great father, Stan arranges for her and her family to get deported. But either they change their mind or something, because Lisa returns in later episodes. This first episode sets the tone for one of Steve's signature storylines, him trying to win over a girl, falling flat, and maybe picking up a lesson along the way. This whole relationship was the kind of shallow surface level stuff you'd expect in high school. Lisa only went out with Steve to enjoy the perks of dating the student body president, and Steve only liked her because she was attractive and popular. Neither of them truly really cared about each other on a deeper level. But that bad experience didn't stop Steve from asking Lisa out again in season 4's 1600 Candles. Because everything changes for him when he grows his first ever pubic hair.
It is here! My first pube!
Oh, it's red!
This gives him a boost of confidence, and he goes up to Lisa to ask her to the school dance and to meet him at the mall the next day. And in a total contradiction to how things played out in the pilot, she's actually into it, and she's impressed by his newfound riz.
Oh, and I got you a present. It's getting to watch me walk away.
Love that chewing gum walk. Very wriggly.
And while Steve is having a great time enjoying his puberty, his parents are totally panicking. They didn't have a great experience with Haley going through puberty, and they're definitely not ready to go through with it all over again with Steve. So Francine gets her hands on a de-aging serum from the CIA to slow down Steve's maturity for a few years. But what she doesn't realise is that the serum doesn't just slow him down, it actually sends him all the way back into being a toddler.
Look! It's gone! My one-man hair is gone!
Can we have one family meal without someone flashing their genitalia?
This obviously ruined things with Lisa, and when a tiny Steve shows up to the mall, Lisa just assumes that he stood her up and sent his tiny little nephew in his place.
So I'm thinking open-toed shoes. You got good feet? Pop off those kicks, give Daddy a look.
Yeah, Steve is kinda freaky. After that, Stan gets an aging serum to bring Steve back to his normal self and then some, expecting him to skip puberty and become a fully grown adult. But once again, they overdo it a bit too much, and Steve wakes up an old man.
Well, I got my pubic hair back. A whole bunch of them. They're white as frickin' Christmas.
Despite seemingly being stood up, Lisa is willing to give Steve another chance, but he's too old looking to convince her that it's actually him. And of course, she doesn't buy it. When Stan and Francine return with the serum that makes him 14 again, he freaks out after hearing all the crappy stuff that puberty brings and runs away. His parents find him hanging out in a retirement home and convince him to take the serum by letting him know that Lisa called and said she's counting on him to show up at the big dance. No teenage boy wants to miss out on that kind of chance, so Steve agrees. And back to his normal age, he goes and smooths things over with Lisa.
I lost track of time.
And at last, Steve finally gets the girl of his dreams.
He's only got one pube! Ew, and it's red!
A drunk Roger, mad that Steve had taken the Smiths' attention away from him during his 1600th birthday week, shows up at the prom and drops Steve's trousers. But at least he got some revenge on Roger when his loose hair strand landed right on his birthday cake.
I hate Steve so much.
What's rough is that none of the bad stuff that happened in this episode was really Steve's fault at all, and after getting humiliated by the bullies, whatever confidence he had pretty much disappeared. And Lisa probably figured out that if she tried to keep things going with Steve, her spot in the school hierarchy would definitely tank. It is a shame that this confident, smooth version of Steve and whatever he had going with Lisa barely got a chance to last. It all fell apart way too fast, mostly thanks to his own family getting in the way. And sadly, this won't be the last time they'd mess with his love life, whether that be by accident or on purpose. And just 4 episodes later, in Escape from Pearl Bailey, any chance of Steve and Lisa getting together again was destroyed for good. In the pilot, Lisa was all about dating the class president for the perks, but by season 4, the tables had turned. She's now class president herself and is running a re-election. At this point, Steve's dating Debbie Hyman, who we will talk about more later, and she ends up running against Lisa in the student body election. But despite his old crush on Lisa, Steve is fully on Debbie's side. He throws himself into the campaign and does everything he can to help her win. But things get personal when it appears that Lisa and her team posted a slam page on Debbie that humiliated her and cost her the election. This causes Steve to pull a full 180 from crushing on Lisa to outright despising her, swearing revenge on her and her closest friends.
I'm gonna destroy Lisa Silver and those bitches that helped her post that slam page!
Wearing a Navajo Joe mask, he gets a buffalo to dump all over Lisa's friend Amy, injects fat into one during a fake liposuction session, and worst of all, gives Lisa oral herpes by stealing her childhood teddy bear and letting a prostitute spend the night with it. And holy crap, that is really, really messed up.
Slut! 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 Slut!
It's some pretty dark and twisted payback, especially when you remember that just a few episodes earlier, Lisa and Steve actually had a shot at becoming a real-life couple. But karma comes back to hit Steve when he finds out that it was actually his own friend who made the slam page about Debbie to sway the election, and he's instantly remorseful for all the awful acts he did to Lisa and the girls. But it's too late to apologise, as they're all prepared to give some serious payback too. The boys do everything they can to escape, but in the end, it's no use. Lisa and her friends corner them, and they finally get their payback.
If we're lucky, we might just take a few of them with us! We're not taking any of them with us!
And that's really the last interaction that Lisa and Steve had together, an extreme contrast from their first time at the dance earlier in that same season. Lisa Silva is significant in Steve's story for a few reasons. She was the first major crush in the show, and she was also the first girl he went from being totally in love with to straight up hating once someone new came along in his life. Realistically, Lisa and Steve were never going to work as a high school couple. Their social circles couldn't be more different, because Lisa is the head cheerleader that every guy in the school is into, and Steve's one of the biggest nerds around, barely even noticed by most girls. But for one fleeting moment when Steve began puberty and started showing some real confidence, he actually got Lisa genuinely interested in him. But just like so many things in his love life, things fell apart before they could really begin, which we'll see will be a real common theme with Steve's love life. Now, let's move on to Kimmy. Just 2 episodes after trying to get with Lisa for the first time, Steve sets his sights on a new girl in episode 3, Stan Knows Best. This time he's trying to find a date for the Aloha dance, and even though the odds are stacked against him, he makes a bold bet with his friends. He's not just going to get a date, he's gonna get to second base.
But I'll bet each of you $20 I also get boob.
And after seeing fellow nerd Frankel get attention after his brother lost his arm on a ski lift, Steve gets an idea. So while tutoring a girl called Kimmy at his house, he casually drops in that his sister was horrifically burned over 98% of her body, with that said sister being Roger.
Oh, I was dating a pool guy, and he thought it'd be kinky if we gave each other chlorine massages. I went first.
And things go even better than expected when she shows up at his house 2 hours early, ready to mess around a little bit. But first she wants to see Steve's sister again, and that's where everything unravels. Kimmy and Roger hit it off a little too well, and instead of getting the action he was hoping for, Steve ends up stuck on the sidelines while his fake burned sister steals the spotlight. So Steve tries to step in and get Roger to back off, but things just go from bad to worse.
He wants to lock me in the attic like I'm some kind of disgusting monster.
Well, you are!
Shut up!
You shut up!
Kim is absolutely shocked by this and walks out. Steve's plan to score almost worked, but it came at the cost of lying for sympathy points. His impatience and jealousy over Roger stealing all of the attention from Kim ended up costing him the chance he really wanted. But honestly, it didn't really seem like a huge loss since Steve was mostly focused on getting to second base and not really starting a relationship. And at least Roger hooked him up with Kim's bra so he could at least show his friends and pretend like he actually scored. So, I guess there's that. Now let's talk about Lindsay Coolidge. So even though Steve didn't get very far with the head cheerleader Lisa Silva in the pilot, by the 4th episode he was still aiming high, and he actually got a bit further with another popular girl called Lindsay Coolidge. And believe it or not, but when he asked her out on a date at the mall, Lindsay actually said yes. But the only condition was that he had to find a date for her friend Jewel. And that sounds pretty easy, right? I mean, Steve has an abundance of single friends.
Godzilla!
But yeah, pretty much every single human rejects poor Jewel.
It's like there's not a human being alive that would go out with that girl.
Hello.
He convinces Roger to go in a Rastafarian disguise, but as soon as he meets her, he's ready to bolt.
Steve, she's so ugly.
But Roger sucks it up and Steve's date goes surprisingly well, so much so that she actually offers to make out with him, an offer that Steve is definitely not used to hearing.
We could just go back to your place and make out.
Well, I had a fun time anyway. See you at school. Huh? Okay.
When they get back to Steve's house, Lisa admits that she only agreed to go out with Steve so Jewel could get a date. But as the night goes on, she actually starts to find herself into Steve for real. Meanwhile, Jewel is ready for anything with Roger, but he keeps dodging her.
Kiss me, funny boy.
Eventually, his disguise gets torn off, exposing him as an alien, right as Steve and Lindsay are about to make out.
Did you see where they went?
Who?
The black guys who did this.
Fortunately, the CIA has mind-wiping devices that erase Lindsay and Jewel's memories of the last 24 hours, and unfortunately for Steve, that also erases her memory of their date. But hey, at least he impressed his dad.
I am deeply disappointed in you.
Dad, I was with this one.
Oh, well, outstanding.
So it is a shame that Lindsay forgot all of the good chemistry that she had built up with Steve. But it's not all over, because he'll get another chance to impress her in Season 3's Big Trouble in Little Langley. She makes her return in dramatic fashion, flooring her car right up to Steve and the boys while they're playing with sparklers in the park. And when Steve accidentally burns Barry with the sparkler, she gets very, very excited.
I'll let you touch my breast if you can top burning fatso hair.
Lindsay clearly gets off seeing Steve do some crazy shit. This is a totally different side to Lindsay compared to the last time we saw her, but I guess it is kind of possible that her appetite for daredevilish actions could be a side effect of the whole mind-wiping thing. Maybe. So Steve's follow-up stunt idea is putting a firecracker in someone and blowing it up, but he struggles to find any takers.
Snot, remember that time I gave you half an orange?
Yeah?
Well, then let me put a firecracker up your ass.
I mean, are you even buddies if your friend doesn't let you stick explosives up their ass? Luckily, Steve finds out that Roger is actually flame retardant and agrees to let him be the one who gets blown up with the fireworks, and everything is set up and ready to go, but Steve just has to toss over a finger blaster to kick things off.
Ah! My thumb! I blew off my thumb!
They should have called it a thumb blaster. Am I right? And when the fireworks explode at the Smith household, at least there's an ambulance of medics ready there to attach his thumb. But hey, Lindsay is very impressed with Steve blowing off his thumb and believes he also blew up his house with the fireworks, and as a reward, she lets him touch her boob.
I can't feel anything.
Are you saying I have small breasts?
No, that's not what I...
You're a real jerk, Steve Smith.
And she didn't even give him a chance to let him touch it with the other hand. Oh dear. But despite all this, Steve is nothing but persistent, because just a season later in Choosy Wives Choose Smith, he gives it one last shot with Lindsay by learning the cello. Apparently he finds out that Lindsay is a, and I quote here, a cello slut. So he reckons that if he performs it really well at the recital, he might finally get with her. Steve is working hard but is sidetracked by dealing with an injured cat who just loves to scratch him.
Why would you do that? I was trying to help you.
He tries to forget Simon and focus on performing the cello, and it looks like Lindsay is more than ready to hook up. But right then, Simon limps in hurt and Steve rushes past Lindsay, convinced Simon is about to die.
Get off me, you psychopath!
Every time it seems like Steve and Lindsay were finally gonna get together, something completely out of his control shuts it down. First her memory got wiped, then he literally blew off his own thumb, and the third time he got attacked by a freaking cat. At this point, it's hard not to think that this relationship was cursed from the very start, like the universe just wasn't having it. But on the upside, if you want to call it that, he did make out with her friend Jewel later on.
Oi! Sorry, kekko bonkers!
Steve's next shot at romance shows up in episode 7, Deacon Stan Jesus Man. This is where we meet Betsy White, the daughter of the Smiths' next door neighbours, the White family.
Looks like you're parking in the sun again, ha ha!
The White family's success is hard to miss, and it really hits home when the church announces that Betsy just made the Olympic gymnastics team. And for Steve, it's love at first sight. Having not seen each other since first grade, Steve reintroduces himself to her, and since Stan is competing with Chuck White to be elected as the next church deacon, Carl Rove convinces to put Steve in the same CPR class as Betsy.
Put him in the girls' class.
Yes! Thank you, Satan.
By taking the same class, they spend more time together, which leads Betsy into revealing that she's only doing gymnastics because her parents make her. Betsy is so sheltered that she considers hand-holding second base, something her mother thinks will lead to kissing, which would then lead to pregnancy. Yep, kissing.
I touched her hand touched her boob. By the transitive property, I got some boob. Algebra's awesome!
Steve's been learning CPR in class, which comes in handy when Roger starts choking on his feeding bag. Roger's like this because he's deep into his reproductive cycle, and his breast milk is used by the Smiths to win over the community and boost Stan's chances in the church's election. This works, and Stan is elected as the new deacon of the church, and more importantly, finally beats Chuck White at something.
Yes! Yes! I am the chosen one! You know what this is? A deacon fanny. Yeah!
So why is Steve giving Roger CPR during his reproductive cycle such a big deal? Because in the process, Roger's egg ends up inside of Steve and he gets pregnant.
You can't be pregnant, you're a virgin! And a boy!
Tell that to my swollen ankles and tender nipples!
Steve and Stan then have a surprisingly sincere talk about what to do, and in the end, they decide to keep the alien baby.
You're keeping your alien baby.
Thanks, Dad.
Did you say alien baby?
No, I said doctor's corpse found in desert.
With Steve still pregnant and back at home, he catches up with Betsy while trying to conceal the fact that he's, pregnant, and they eventually make out. And it turns out that Betsy's mum was right, because kissing can get you pregnant, because Steve's pregnancy passes on to Betsy. And in response to this, Betsy's parents send her off to her aunt's farm in Iowa. But she's so happy about this because by being pregnant, it means that she can't do gymnastics anymore and is finally free. It's just too bad it had to get to this point for her finally to feel free and happy. And this is the last time we see her. And I've always wondered, if she did have the baby, who does it look like? And who's officially the father? Is it Roger? Steve? Both of them? Could the baby look like something like Rogu, or could it look like a little Steve? We'll probably never know. By this point, this feels like Steve's most authentic relationship, and honestly, it would have been interesting to see where things could have gone if the whole kiss pregnancy alien egg situation hadn't have happened. Realistically, it probably wouldn't have lasted with her family's constant meddling, but it would have made some really interesting plot points with Stan and Chuck's rivalry, with Steve and Betsy's relationship stuck in the middle of them. So after trying and failing to chase the popular girls in season 1, Steve gives Cougars a try when he starts dating a senior citizen. And this is easily one of the weirdest romances in the earliest seasons. In this episode, Steve has to come to terms with the fact that he lost his grandpa Smith, and even though it turns out that his real grandfather is notorious thief Jack Smith, Steve still misses the grandfather that he grew up with.
I want my fake dead grandpa!
While clearing out his grandpa's apartment, Steve meets one of Grandpa Smith's old friends, Gretchen, who he reminisces with. And isn't it sweet that Gretchen is there to help Steve through this grieving process? Look at them. Oh. Okay, now that's kind of fucked up. Now keep in mind that Steve is only 14 years old here. I think Chris Henson needs to go round and give Granny a visit.
You want to explain yourself?
Sadly, Steve doesn't have a problem with this huge age gap. In fact, he's proud of it and brags about it to his friends.
Dude, she's got wrinkles. So do raisins, but those taste pretty sweet.
But when Steve goes over to see Gretchen again, he notices Snot's jean vest draped over her chair, before then spotting Snot sneaking out of the window. And just like that, Steve realizes that Gretchen's been seeing his friend behind his bag.
I don't have long for this world. Monogamy is for girls in their 60s.
As much as this pains Steve, he's definitely better off without Gretchen. I mean, it's only a matter of time before she dies and he'll have another old person to grieve for. Plus, Gretchen is a straight up predator. I'm sorry, but Christ. And although he won't get with anyone as old as Gretchen again, this definitely won't be the last time that he goes after an older woman. But yeah, Steve might have struck out in the first season, but let's see if he fares any better in the second. In the season 2 premiere Camp Refugee, he finds a potential partner in the unlikeliest of places, Africa. See, when it's summertime, Stan insists on sending his son to a summer camp, but unknowingly sends him to a place called Camp Refugee, which is actually a refugee camp in the middle of Africa. Francine then sends Stan to pick up Steve, but he instead turns the place into a summer camp to show that it can still be fun.
Welcome to Camp Refugee. By the way, this kind of fun isn't free. I'm gonna need checks from all your parents.
But Steve is still bored until a girl called Makiva dives over him and kills a giant snake. She introduces herself and Stan instantly sees her as Steve's first camp crush.
Oh man, it is so on. You just found your camp love. Pound it.
Dad, I
Pound it!
At the camp dance, Makiva gives Steve a necklace and sparks begin to fly between them. But right when they're about to kiss, Stan ruins the moment by giving them step-by-step instructions on how to recreate how he had his first kiss back at camp. And if that wasn't bad enough, Makiva then gets kidnapped by the same rebels who forced her and her people into the refugee camp to begin with. So Stan comes up with the plan to get her back, which is challenging the rebels to Camp Olympics with her freedom and her people's land on the line. The Camp Olympics soon results in a foot race between Steve and the Bwango leader, which he wins thanks to being chased to the finish line by a lion. So Makiva is free and she and Steve can finally embrace and get romantic. Or not.
I'm sorry, Steve, but I'm kind of a crazy chick.
Yep, after being kidnapped by the group that destroyed her village, she then went back into the arms of their clearly much older leader, which is disturbing on all levels. And even though Makiva didn't exactly become Steve's girlfriend, she was at least his first camp crush. And if there's one thing that can always be true about camp romances, it's that they usually end in heartbreak. Something that Stan himself learned the hard way when he was a kid too.
Well, son, as you grow older, you'll find that the hurt fades away. Why, Amy? Why don't you love me?
Now, let's move on to Debbie Hyman. Steve's first ever long-term girlfriend Debbie is first introduced in Season 2, Episode 2, The American Dad After School Special. After hiding from gym class in the school air vent, Steve runs into Debbie, who uses the air vents as her sanctuary.
I hate running.
Then we're on the same page. Welcome to my sanctuary.
And even though she's not the usual popular girl that he's into, the two quickly hit it off. Still, Steve's too nervous to ask her out until his dad puts a bomb collar on him to push him into it.
Whoops, accidentally set it for 24 minutes. Oh man, you better run.
Luckily for him, it works, and their first date at the cemetery is perfect for goth gal Debbie and Steve's weird nerdy knowledge about decomposing.
You know, putrefaction is simply a community of necrophores that engorge the carrion with sulfur dioxide gas.
Things go so well that Steve eventually introduces her to the family.
Where's Debbie? Behind that fat girl?
No, Dad,
Is the fat girl going to lead us to Debbie?
That's Debbie!
To the panic room!
You'd like Debbie if you got to know her, Dad. There's a lot more to her than you think.
There's more of her?
And at the same time, Roger sees her and develops a crush on her, which usually isn't a good thing.
She's like a female Mr. Belvedere.
Unfortunately for Stan, seeing Debbie triggered him into believing that he was overweight and develop a dangerous eating disorder. So with his dad being reduced to this anorexic state, Steve feels he has no choice but to break up with Debbie.
Forget me, big beautiful creature!
But even still, Stan still won't eat anything and continues the eating disorder in secret. And when Haley and Francine uncover the truth and Steve realizes that breaking up with Debbie didn't change anything, he makes a big speech at a restaurant saying why Debbie is the best thing to ever happen to him.
She was sweet and beautiful and kind of freaky in a good way, and I'm gonna check every buffet in town until I find her.
And luckily for him, Debbie happened to be at the restaurant at the same time because Roger lured her into a fake interview for the Anne Rice fan club.
Steve, whether you want to date a fatso, a girl with hairy arms, or even one with Kirsten Dunst teeth, if you're happy, I'm happy.
And wow, Steve actually got with the girl and remained with her until the end of the episode. Hallelujah. 4 episodes later, Debbie returns as Steve's girlfriend and has dinner with the Smiths. And although Stan had a dramatic response to Debbie's appearance the first time around, when he sees that she too has a passion for guns, he actually starts liking her.
You know, you're all right, Big Steph.
However, the same can't be said for Francine, since she feels that Debbie is filling the role as the main woman in Steve's life, something that she has a hard time accepting.
Who does that fatso think she is?
Oh, is Debbie a larger woman? I hadn't noticed.
Francine does not take this too well and goes as far as planting CIA drugs in Steve's locker, but Steve knows that she planted them there and literally breaks up with her.
You'll find someone new. Maybe you'll get some cats.
This is all Debbie's fault.
Let's be adults about this, Mom.
So by losing Steve to Debbie, Francine decides she wants to have another baby. But after they battle over having another kid, Stan and Francine realise that Steve is supposed to be growing up and does not need his mum the way he used to. Right before this happens.
Debbie broke up with me!
Oh, Steve, Mommy's here, honey. Even Debbie didn't find you attractive.
She didn't?
No, not even a little. You can stay right here at home with Mommy.
Yep, just as soon as we were getting used to Debbie and Steve being a couple, she literally broke up with him off screen, and we weren't even given a reason why. From a showrunner's perspective, I think they broke them up because Steve trying to get with a girl and failing is such a big part of his character. Think about it, he had 5 romantic interests in just the first season alone. Plus, with Haley being in a relationship with Jeff, they could only really do these types of storylines with Steve. But I think a lot of fans really liked Debbie, which is probably why they got back together 2 seasons later in Escape from Pearl Bailey.
Let's not ever break up again.
Never again.
This time around, instead of focusing on how Steve and Debbie's relationship affects his family, we see its impact on his friends. Because when Steve starts giving Debbie way more attention than them, they definitely start to notice. I've already gone over this with the Lisa Silva section, so I won't rehash it now, but when Steve tells Debbie that he was behind the revenge plot, she's predictably upset and breaks up with him.
You're no better than them. We're through.
Wait! This can't possibly end badly. You're my first girlfriend!
Oh, Steve, you'll never learn. Steve and the gang try to escape the wrath of the entire school by hiding out in the goth hangout, which is where they run into Debbie. And after seeing the school turn on Steve, she starts to understand why he acted the way he did and decides to forgive him. The two patch things up, but Steve also learns an important lesson. He needs to balance his relationship with his girlfriend and his time with his friends. So to make things right, he's even willing to face the consequences with them, but luckily Debbie and the goth step in, creating a distraction to help the boys slip away from the angry mob. Although Debbie's distraction didn't work, as Steve and the guys still got beaten up, at least Steve and Debbie got back together, meaning that we got at least one more episode with them as a couple in that same season, more specifically in the episode Bar Mitzvah Hustle. At the start of the episode, Steve is goofing around with a fart sound machine, and Debbie's clearly not loving it.
It throws farts up to 100 yards!
Well, if it makes you happy.
Then Snot shows up with his bar mitzvah study buddy Eitan. It turns out that Debbie and Eitan already know each other, and to make things worse, she's clearly drawn to Eitan's maturity, especially in contrast to Steve's immaturity.
Perhaps you'll enjoy.
He's right. I did enjoy that, very much so.
The next day, Debbie breaks the bad news to Steve that Eitan has asked her to be his date for the bar mitzvah, and just like that, she breaks up with Steve for the 3rd time.
I'm sorry, but I need a man, not a boy.
Well, I mean, he is 14, Debbie. What do you expect? Besides, farts can be funny. Naturally, Steve handles this breakup like the little boy she says he is, putting together a ridiculous revenge plan to steal the presents from Eitan's bar mitzvah.
And once Debbie sees him freak out over losing his precious gifts, she'll realize that he's the little boy.
Steve puts together a heist plan with Barry, Toshi, and Roger. They stir up Eitan's paranoia, so he's on the edge all the time.
They're stealing my presents!
They're stealing my presents!
Next, Steve plans to steal all of his cards and money using Snot, and Eitan is humiliated yet again. But Snot is blamed and is at risk from being exiled from the Jewish temple. All this leads to Debbie breaking up with Eitan, so Debbie is interested in hanging out with Steve again.
3 large pizzas with everything.
Oh, that's for me. But let's hang out sometime.
But Steve is now in a pickle. If he tells the truth to save Snot's bar mitzvah, he risks losing Debbie. After Roger's lawyer disguise fails to help, Steve confesses to the council that the whole theft plan was his idea, clearing Snot's name.
Steve, how could you?
Debbie, wait!
And that's the last time we see Debbie in a significant role, with her only making a few cameos since. And while Debbie was Steve's most successful relationship up until that point, it is clear why they weren't really a good match. Because even though she's a misfit like Steve, Debbie is way more mature and grounded than he is. Steve's behaviour around the school election didn't help either, because he put her on a pedestal and didn't really listen to her. Plus, it is tough to imagine Debbie dealing with all of the crazy Smith family antics the way Jeff Fisher does. By bringing them back together just to break them up again feels a little redundant, but like I said earlier, I think the producers wanted to have their cake and eat it too, because they liked Steve and Debbie as a couple, but realistically they couldn't keep them together for the long term. I also didn't really like the way she ditched Steve for Aton either. Saying all this though, I think you could definitely bring Debbie back. It's been too long. So with Debbie out of the picture, let's move on to Svetlana. Steve's had plenty of episodes chasing after girls, but there are also several episodes where he and his friends, Snot, Barry and Toshi, all go after the same girl at once. And the first time this happened was in season 2's of Ice and Men, but instead of a student, this time it's an adult woman. So, in the middle of winter, a delivery truck comes and Steve and the boys believe that the Russian binoculars they ordered have arrived, but the box they were given is clearly too big for that, and out comes a Russian bride called Svetlana.
I am your Russian bride.
These are the best binoculars ever!
The mail order bride business is too complicated to explain, but thanks to this purchase, she's living with them and the others at school are stunned to see it.
I noticed you weren't rooting through my garbage this morning.
Now that I have Svetlana, your discarded Q-tips have lost their allure.
When Steve and his friends get excited at the thought of seeing her naked, she reminds them that she has to protect her assets until she's officially married to one of them.
She doesn't have to act like a whore until one of you marries her.
But you're not married and you're a total whore.
That's because I was born in America.
So the boys hold a very boyish contest in the pool, which is whoever can hold their breath for the longest gets to marry her, leaving Snot as the winner. But despite losing the contest, Steve still seems very happy to give Svetlana away at her and Snot's nuptials.
Seems like just yesterday you popped out of that box and I was planning to have sex with you.
And just when they're about to get married, Toshi interrupts in Russian. He declares his love for Svetlana, and she's so moved she cries and leaves Snot for Toshi. So, what happens next? We don't know, but it does sound like that Svetlana and Toshi got married. But seeing as she's never seen again after this episode, we can imagine that their marriage was probably annulled. Because, well, Toshi is a minor, but at least she's still remembered, referenced one more time by Toshi in season 4.
None of you can understand defending the honor of a woman because none of you have girlfriends.
Svetlana might have been a more group crush for Steve and his friends, but she's on this list because she's the first in a long line of mostly out-of-reach girls that they all team up to chase. And as we'll see later, they're still willing to go after adult women, no matter how problematic that may be. Next up, Becky Arangino. In the season 3 premiere, The Vacation Goose, Steve bounces back from Debbie by having a meet-cute with his crew's activities director, Becky.
You're cute.
In a harmless little brother kind of way, right?
No, in an I've taken a lot of boys' virginity kind of way.
How exciting for Steve until you realise that Becky is probably an adult, and least we forget that Steve is still 14. Making it super gross. But of course, the constantly horny Steve doesn't care about that, and Becky doesn't care about the romantic gap either, since she cozies up with Steve when meeting his family.
Hey everyone, this is Becky. She works on the boat.
Your son is 14 going on me.
Steve getting close with a pretty woman like Becky is one of the red flags that sets off Francine's suspicion that this cruise isn't real, because earlier on in the episode it's revealed that their past few vacations were actually VR simulations. So she assumes that this one is too, convinced she's trapped in yet another fake scenario, and so Francine panics and jumps off the boat. Unfortunately for her though, it is a real cruise, and Steve and Becky are forced to cut the romantic moment short and spring into action to save Francine from her own paranoia.
Becky, thanks for getting us this lifeboat. I mean life boobs. Wait, no, I was right.
While they save Francine, they get stranded in the middle of the sea for 4 days before then finding an island. And that's when Becky finally gets in the mood.
They have any chocolate sauce? I'll let you lick it off me.
But they soon learn that the island that they crashed onto is inhabited by people who hunt humans for sport, so now they're running for their lives. But despite all odds, everyone survives and hides in a cave as night falls. It's here where Becky suggests to Steve that they should light a fire while she catches rainwater with a big leaf, but as soon as she grabs one, it causes a cave-in and instantly kills her. So now the entrance is sealed shut and the only chance the Smiths have to survive is eat Becky. They hold off for as long as possible, but it's Steve of all people who gives in first.
Okay, that's it. Let's do it. Let's eat her.
Eating Becky keeps the family alive long enough for the hunters to break through and find them, only to then reveal that they are actually a part of the Jimmy Buffett's Most Dangerous Game family retreat.
You must be starving. Hey, weren't there 5 of you?
And Steve once again was denied losing his virginity in the cruelest way possible. Losing it to an older woman may have messed him up in the long term, but he was far more traumatized seeing that woman die and be forced to eat her. And this won't be the last time that Steve's love interests meet a brutal fate. So Steve may have traumatically lost Becky, but he rebounded with Carmen Electra.
Carmen Electra? Doesn't he mean Carmen Electra? No! No, he doesn't.
In the season 3 finale, Spring Breakup, Roger turned the Smith house into a huge spring break party. And Steve and his friends see this as the golden opportunity to score big with college girls. And just when it looked like Steve was about to lose his virginity, his eyes caught with Carmen Electra.
Come on, let's do this. Unhand me, inebriated temptress. I shan't waste an ounce of boner on you.
And I'm glad Steve didn't go through with this for a few reasons. 1, that woman was far too drunk. And 2, he was too young to lose his V-card yet. Again, he's 14. So Steve shoots his shot with Carmen and she predictably lets him down gently. So that should be the end of it, right? Actually, no. In a surprise development, we next see Electra and Steve in his bedroom and she agrees to take his virginity. But before Steve can go through with it, he begins a series of precautions by showing her his medical records to prove that he's free of any diseases.
Nowadays, you can't be too safe. What with all the wang shriveling sex diseases my mom tells me about during bath time.
And as crazy as this is, you've got to give Steve credit. He's more than willing to take necessary precautions before having sex. And so that should be the end of it, right? Nope, Carmen comes back with her medical records to prove she's clean. Okay, so Carmen is clean and they can therefore finally have sex, right? Well, no, because then Steve finds out that she had breast implants. So he breaks things off.
Oh, sorry, Carmen, I can't. The first boobs I'm with have got to be real. Lose the balloons, then give me a call.
This is literally Steve's dream happening right before him, and he still finds a way to reject it. I personally feel that he was finding every excuse to avoid having sex, because deep down, he's just as scared of it as his friends. But Carmen isn't deterred because she announces live on TV that she's flying out a doctor to remove her implants, therefore making them all natural. So finally, there's nothing more for Steve to have reservations over. They can finally have sex.
No!
If I had a nickel for every time Steve was about to lose his virginity and for the girl to be crushed, then I'd have about 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it is crazy that it happened twice. And the saddest part is that if Carmen had some sort of cushioning on her chest, it could have withstood the impact and she'd have survived. But alas, all she had was her natural breasts. Now, let's take a breather from age-inappropriate women to Akiko Yoshida. Arguably Steve's most well-known love interest in the series is his close friend Toshi's younger sister, but originally in her first appearance, she's much younger than Steve.
I think we should go with our first choice, Toshi's sister Akiko.
Then in her next appearance in season 4's Wiener of Our Discontent, her character design now made her around the same age as Steve. And yeah, aging her up does mess with the American Dad continuity a bit, but honestly, it just works a bit better this way. So we'll just say a wizard did it and call it a day.
Ah, yeah. Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
When Steve uses Toshi's chopsticks to pretend to be a walrus, Toshi gets his sister to explain that what he did was offensive.
Until now, Toshi has stoically tolerated your boorish jokes. But no more!
Akiko, listen.
Do not interrupt!
And this seemed to be the moment where Steve found Akiko attractive.
Anyone else get a boner when Akiko slapped me?
After overseeing Steve and Toshi's hot dog eating challenge, Akiko returns 2 seasons later for a Halloween special in Best Little Horror House in Langley Falls. When her brother refuses to trick or treat with Steve and friends due to not liking his samurai costume that his mum picked out for him, Mrs. Yoshida asks the guys to go trick or treating with Akiko.
I'm a boner.
What?
No, I mean, yeah. You can come, more the merrier, whatevs. I love you, not even.
When it's time to take Akiko home, Steve isn't ready to say goodbye and keeps her out longer. But Steve doesn't realise the consequences of not listening to her protective brother, and he's prepared to attack. Steve and Akiko quickly find out that Toshi is on the hunt for them and run into the woods and find the actual Langley Falls.
Hey, let's go swimming. There's a cave on the other side of the falls. They say if you swim to it with someone, you're friends forever.
And with their newfound private time, Steve finally shows off his flirting skills.
Excuse my hair, it's super frizzy, and the only thing about this moment I wish I could change.
But of course, they underestimated Toshi's skills and he crashes their private moment. And just when it seemed that Steve had met his doom, he reminds Toshi that his sister is not a little kid anymore, and if he doesn't loosen his kung fu grip, he'll lose her forever. This gets through to Toshi, who realises that he's just way too overprotective and finally lets them go. But honestly, seeing as she was technically a little girl just 4 seasons ago, I don't really blame Toshi for forgetting that she aged up so fast. Anyway, Akiko thanks Steve for sticking up for her, so now that her brother's not hovering, she can finally share her feelings, right?
I have such a big crush on Doug.
But Doug's 9!
He's a really nice guy.
Damn that Doug, Steve never stood a chance. Still, at least he can be very pleased knowing that he made Akiko's life better. Now she feels ready to date other people and has the freedom to, and that's what true love is after all, right? And as the seasons rolled, Steve never stopped having feelings for Akiko, such as in season 8, Spelling Bee My Baby. And this time, it's not Toshi driving a wedge between them, but their mum's rivalry. Akiko's mum Hiko pushes her kids to work hard and get into a good college, while Francine wants Steve to just have fun. But after chatting with Greg and Terry, Francine starts to buy into Hiko's way of thinking and decides that Steve needs to find a talent to get into a good school. After a lot of searching, Steve's hidden talent turns out to be spelling.
Steve, you're a great speller! You can win the National Spelling Bee!
A talent that Akiko has as well.
I love watching you spell.
Speaking of spells, I think you just cast one on me.
Cheesy puns aside, Steve is a lot smoother than he was back in season 1, where his big pickup routine was snapping bras. And despite their fondness for one another, their mothers get super competitive, and it's basically like the Montagues and the Capulets all over again.
Shakespeare, bitches!
Fed up with his mum overworking him, Steve tries to get away by visiting Langley Falls, where he unexpectedly runs into Akiko, i.e. the same spot where they swam together in their last episode. Steve and Akiko then bond over their shared frustration at their mums, and they even shared their first kiss. So yay Steve, even if he is still the same awkward nerd he's always been.
I'm just gonna sit here a bit because I'm so comfortable. Just gonna sit here a while until my comfortability goes down.
So with both of their talents for spelling, they get into nationals, but when Francine figures out that they're seeing each other, she assumes that Akiko is manipulating him.
Just toying with your emotions to distract you from your spelling?
She would never do that.
Her whore mother would.
And when Steve tries to talk to Akiko again at the falls, he finds out that she left behind a rejection letter.
She said she had to rethink her priorities, and that I'm not worth her time.
And that really sucks that Akiko would do that, until we see that Francine was the one who planted the letter and then kidnapped her.
I love being with Steve. Not according to this note you wrote.
With Steve now motivated to win the competition to get back at Akiko, Francine's scheme is all coming together.
I'll let you out when Steve's a national champion.
That's until Hiko uses her Yakuza connections to locate her daughter and manages to break her out. Making it to the spelling bee just in time, Akiko wants to explain what happened, but Steve doesn't want to hear it.
Your mother.
Your mother!
Steve, let me explain.
Your mother!
Come on, Steve, just listen to her for 10 seconds. Eventually, Francine comes clean and admits that she was the one who kidnapped Akiko and also planted the note.
I wrote the note and kidnapped Akiko.
You what?
I put her in a cage.
I love how casually she says that, as if it's just another Tuesday for her. Then when Akiko heard what Steve said to his mom, she intentionally misspelled her word to let Steve win. Then Steve intentionally misspelled his word for her to win, and so they went on and on all day.
We've got 2 really great kids here.
We sure do.
So the spelling bee ends with neither of them winning, but Steve and Akiko ended the contest winning each other's hearts. A rare happy ending for Steve and his budding romance. No other shoe dropping, no random guy to steal the girl, no scaffolding falling, just good old fashioned romance. Tragically, however, this episode is also the end of their romance, because Akiko has only appeared in 3 episodes of American Dad since this, all of which are just cameos. Her absence hasn't been explained, but the most likely reason that she can't see Steve is because she's attending private school. I really do hope they bring Akiko back to rekindle her romance with Steve, because out of all of Steve's romances, I'd put Akiko at the top of the list so far. I mean, come on, they're just so adorable together, because unlike Debbie, Akiko accepted Steve for who he is. She never told him that he acted childish or that she was better than him. It is a bit of a shame that the showrunners did seem to drop the ball with this one. But moving on, we come to Janine Winthrop. In season 5's A Jones for a Smith, Steve has a meet cute while dissecting a frog.
We should hang out sometime after school.
I'm a nerd.
I know. Nerds are kind of my thing.
Well, hallelujah for Steve, he's hit the jackpot with this one, because not only is she attractive, into nerds just like him, but she's actually his own age. Steve and Janine hang out at her place and he meets her dad, and to Steve's surprise, her dad is also pretty supportive and allows them to get intimate once he meets his parents. Now, everyone knows that meeting Stan and Francine is hard enough, but it's especially harder when Stan gets addicted to crack. So when the Smiths show up at the Winthrop's place, things already go tits up, because Stan gets shown their priceless Fabergé egg and he immediately sees it as the perfect thing to pawn off for drugs with his dealer.
What am I supposed to do with that? Come back with cash and we'll do business.
And when this plan falls through, Stan gets desperate for quick cash and tries a very sneaky move. He goes right under the table, thinking that if he wiggles between Janine's dad's legs, he might be able to score some drug money, thus ruining Steve's chances to be with Janine.
Honey, point them to the door.
First you go down that hallway, and then you take a left.
Stan eventually goes to rehab and manages to beat his addiction, but Steve is still angry and won't forgive him.
I will hate you until the day I die.
Sure thing, kiddo. Camping sounds great.
And I can't say I blame him, because Janine was everything Steve could have really hoped for in a girl. She was attractive, genuinely into him, but Stan just had to go and mess it up, didn't he? But yeah, even if he did hate his dad, I don't know why Steve didn't try to talk to Janine and her family to try and patch things up after Stan's recovery. Even then, I doubt her father would ever forget that first impression. And that's another challenge that Steve has to confront as a teenage boy. Not only does his potential love interest have to be into him, but her parents also have to approve as well. And on top of that, his parents have to not fuck it all up. So, with Janine out of the picture, along came Amy. 4 episodes later, Steve is in the same science class, and when he sees a red ball bounce by, he suddenly gets super assertive with Amy.
Kiss me.
I'm not gonna kiss you. With my top on.
It's like a scene in a porno, and I should know because I reviewed the actual American Dad adult parody for a video, and I still see porno Roger in my nightmares. Christ. So of course this was just a dream, because Steve isn't that smooth. The red ball bouncing made Steve realise that he was lucid dreaming and could do whatever he wanted to. As it turns out, Steve is getting way too good at lucid dreaming and starts acting pretty cocky about it around Klaus and Amy, so they come up with a plan to make Steve think that he's lucid dreaming in real life. And it works like a charm, because Steve shows up at school in his underwear, totally convinced that he can do whatever he wants without any consequences. So he starts aggressively flirting with Amy, not knowing that it's all real. But luckily for him, she's impressed by his ballsiness.
Steve, you're so crazy today.
It is possible that Steve just ignited a genuine chemistry between him and Amy without even realising it. Maybe once he realises that he's not dreaming, they can start going out.
Let's fly!
No, don't!
Does my leg look broken? Oh my god!
Now, there's a rude awakening, and then there's this. As brutal as this was for Amy, we do hear from Steve in the credits that Amy's family are considering prosecuting him for attempted murder, meaning that she at least survived the incident. So ignoring all the impaling stuff, it has been shown that when Steve is super confident, he can naturally pull the ladies, like he did here, as well as when he asked out Lisa. And yeah, things did end spectacularly bad with Amy, but as we all know, for Steve, love is always around the corner. Steve meets a new girl called Ashley in season 6's Stan's Food Restaurants, and she tells Steve that she got kicked out of her previous school for having too much sex.
Oh, and just so you know, I end up going all the way on the first date every time.
She asks if he'd like to come over while her mum's out of town and if he could bring a friend to hang out with her best friend Julie. He gets Snot to come along and they think that they're gonna have the time of their lives, and then she introduces them to Julie, who literally turns out to be a doll. As crazy as Ashley turns out to be, Steve is more than willing to put up with her to get some action, much to the annoyance of Snot, who literally has to sit there and pretend to enjoy a doll's company. Snot gives them some privacy and tosses the doll to the bed before then using the bathroom, but Ashley immediately senses that something happened to Julie and rushes in, seeing her legs spread open, with Snot zipping up his trousers.
He didn't use a condom?
You didn't use a condom?
Snot, how could you be so reckless? The next day at school, Ashley tells Steve that Julie's pregnant but decided not to keep it. She also says that Julie was the one who actually came onto Snot first, and Ashley says that the emotional strain of Julie's procedure means that she needs to spend all of her time with her. This makes Steve realise that he and Snot need to find a way to get rid of the doll so he and Ashley can finally do it. They sneak into Ashley's house and makes it look as if Julia unalived herself. And side note, really sorry, but I've got to use that word because, you know, YouTube censors, and I did get demonetized before for actually saying that word. But although Ashley is a little crazy, she isn't dumb. She knows that this isn't Julie's handwriting and that she was actually murdered.
We cannot fool around while her killer is still on the loose.
Ah, that's it. I'm out of here.
But to be honest, the moment that Steve found out that Ashley thought her doll was alive and had sex with Snot, he should have dipped. But instead, he just wants to get his leg over. And it's kind of terrible that Steve and Snot didn't care about Ashley's mental health and didn't encourage her to seek professional help. Instead, Steve made a fairly selfish act of offering the doll so he could have sex with her. He had to know that she'd be emotionally devastated by the death of her best friend. But then again, Steve doesn't care because he's just got one thing on his mind.
Have sex with Steve.
In loving memoriam to your best friend's dying wish.
So although that Steve found Ashley a little crazy with her doll, Steve himself found himself in love with a painting. In season 6's Farbreak Hotel, Steve is utterly bewitched by this painting, and Hector, the hotel concierge, explains that the artist Patrick Nagel painted this woman back in 1981. Later on, Hector hands Steve a brochure that breaks down how to travel back in time using your mind, and to pull it off, Steve has to get into a hotel room that's stuck in the 80s and focus like crazy to transport himself back to that era. And this works, and Steve finds himself in the year 1981. So he searches the hotel to find the artist Patrick Nagel, asking if he could help him find the girl from his painting. And Nagel seems very keen on helping Steve find his girl, but offers him some cherry wine first. Steve passes out after the drink and wakes up naked in bed, and while he slept, Nagel painted Steve, thus revealing that Steve is the model in the painting.
While you slumbered, I stripped you naked, placed a black wig on you, put a cougar in your lap, and voila!
So yes, one of the entries on the love life of Steve Smith is Steve Smith himself. And as fun of a twist as that was, I was kind of hoping to see the woman from the painting and see how Steve and her would interact. Famous muses of famous artists can sometimes be as interesting as the artists themselves, and this person seemed to have an enchanting mystery about her, but true to Steve's bad luck, the mysterious woman he'd been longing for all along was just himself wearing a wig. So now we get to the most complicated and messed up relationship thus far in season 7's Virtual Insanity. In science class, there's this nerdy girl called Chelsea who's clearly into Steve, but he totally misses the signs, which is so typical for teenage boys who obsess over girls while overlooking the ones who actually like them. Anyway, right on cue, a new girl shows up and she's exactly the blonde bombshell that he usually fantasizes over, and to his shock, this girl is called Phyllis and asks him out straight away.
Wow, I don't believe it. This is too good to be real.
Of course this is real. And this is really happening. Because this is real.
See, you know why I said this was the most messed up relationship thus far? Well, it's because Phyllis is really an avatar played by his own father. The reasoning behind Stan's insane idea comes from realising that he missed Steve's birthday party and has been missing out on a lot of father and son time over the years. And when he tries to hang out with Steve, he turns him down because he's at a point where he's not interested in bonding with his dad, because he's more interested in girls.
My son wants nothing to do with me, and the only way to get close to him is to be an incredibly stacked teenage girl.
And Stan as Phyllis takes Steve to all the places he wishes he could take him himself, like a baseball game, and they have a really great time. But when Steve moves in for a kiss, Stan hesitates and pulls away.
Good night, kiddo. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it was great.
Steve's confused by the mixed signals that Phyllis gave him and figures that she just wants to be his friend, not his girlfriend. This is when Chelsea steps in and gets Steve's attention, suggesting that maybe the girl he's been looking for all along is right in front of him.
There's a lot about me you don't know.
And how exciting for Steve to finally meet a fellow nerdy girl who's into the same kind of stuff that he is. Because as much as he got along with Debbie, I doubt that they were able to communicate in Orc language. Fun fact, Phyllis is voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar and Chelsea is played by Alison Hannigan. Any other Buffy fans out there? Raise your hands if you're excited for the upcoming reboot, because I am. Anyway, Steve tells his parents that Chelsea is the girl that he wants to ask to the homecoming dance.
She was really enjoying her time with you.
Sure didn't seem like it. She wouldn't even kiss me.
Nice girls don't kiss on the first date, Steve.
Back in the Phyllis avatar, Stan is determined to sway Steve away from Chelsea, so Stan says what is probably the only thing that would change Steve's mind.
If you go to the dance with me, I'll have sex with you.
Okay!
Oh, dear. So while Stan is responsible for sabotaging Steve and Chelsea's relationship, Steve should have had the common sense to prioritize being with Chelsea over having sex with someone that he doesn't really like as much. But as we all know by now, with Steve, he pretty much only thinks with his D. And obviously, this is super messed up, but Stan rationalizes it the only way he can.
Plus, I get to be there for his biggest milestone ever, losing his virginity. Except I will be locked in eye contact with my son while he plows my cyber soil.
They get to the dance and Stan immediately gets nervous about what he thinks he has to do, but decides to go through with it anyway. Then Francine shows up at the CIA headquarters, upset because she thinks Stan is putting work before Steve. As Francine figures out what Stan's up to, she's rightfully upset. Since she can't reach him through the avatar chamber, she crashes into the dance in a giant powerlift mecha and goes after Phyllis.
Get away from him, you bitch!
But anyway, amidst the chaos, Francine convinces Stan that this isn't how you get closer to your son, and the best thing to do is simply be there for him. Stan finally realizes that he's been wrong, and without revealing himself, Phyllis gently lets Steve down and encourages him to dance with Chelsea.
Your dad, he loves you.
I'm sorry, have you been spending time with my dad? Are you banging my dad?
Hey, whoa, come on.
Now, thank goodness that worked out, and we don't have to worry about Steve losing his virginity to his own dad. Now he's free to go back to Chelsea, where their love can blossom the way it was meant to be.
Turns out Chelsea didn't like that I went to the dance with Phyllis. She's got way more pride than her physical appearance would suggest.
As much as this sucks, I respect Chelsea for standing her ground. From her perspective, the guy she had a genuine connection with dumped her for a hookup, so we shouldn't really blame her for denying Steve a second dance. She even pops up again in Season 9 Steve and Snot's test tubular adventure, and as I said earlier, Steve should have wised up and declined the sex bait from Phyllis and realised how good he had it with Chelsea. Getting in between Steve and Chelsea and exploiting Steve's teenage boy horniness is one of the absolute worst things that Stan has ever done. It permanently severed what could have been a really great relationship, and the only one who came out with it okay was Stan.
But you caused that terrible moment.
Yep. Everything worked out for everybody in the end.
This sounds like beating a dead horse, but Chelsea is yet another love interest for Steve that has never got off the ground. But it would be nice to see it rekindled, seeing that Steve has reunited with other girls in the series like Debbie and Akiko. It would be great if Chelsea could forgive him and we could see how a relationship may be able to work between them. And as messed up as the whole situation was, with Stan almost having sex with Steve in an avatar, it somehow isn't even the strangest relationship that Steve has ever had. And speaking of strange, let's discuss Alicia. So the Smiths can see right through most of Roger's disguises, but there's a few that they can't, and unfortunately for Steve, that was Alicia. In Season 12, Stanley Tendergrass, we get a flashback of Steve playing Spin the Bottle, and it lands on a beautiful woman. But little did Steve know that he was actually kissing one of Roger's personas, a fact that he didn't know until much later.
We went on 7 dates!
9. I roofied you on 2 of them. Nothing happened. Wink, wink.
I have no idea why Steve just breezed past that last line, but then again, he most likely doesn't want to remember. And I hope Roger is kidding here, because that's so horrific. It's really interesting seeing what other people see when Roger's in disguise, and it makes you wonder, what if Roger is also another one of these ladies on the list? Hell, what if he's all of them? But putting that disturbing thought aside, let's continue. Glitter and honey. So here we are. I think many of you American Dad fans knew this very disturbing episode was coming. In the season 9 premiere, Steve and Snot continued their endless pursuit of attempting to lose their virginity.
What about
now?
Don't you understand?
Out of desperation, Steve comes up with the idea of using a cloning device from the CIA headquarters, using the DNA of 2 hot girls to clone them and therefore have them as their dates.
I know it looks bad, 2 teenage boys in a girl's dressing room, but I can assure you we are only here to collect pubic hair.
But just as they're about to find out, something in the cloning process didn't go exactly as planned.
Ah! Unclone! Unclone! Control-Z! Control-Z!
Yep, the clones they expected to be around their age came out as infants. So now Steve and Snot have the responsibility of looking after 2 babies, but luckily Roger opens up a daycare in the attic to look after them while they go to school. And when they return from school, they see that the girls have rapidly aged. This causes Steve to realise that at the rate they're aging, they'll be around the same age as them on the day of prom.
In just 2 more days, they'll be the perfect age for prom.
And after prom.
And yeah, that obviously sounds very icky, seeing as both Steve and Snot knew these girls as infants. And things get even more disturbing as we watch Steve and Snot take care of the girls as they rapidly grow over the next few days. This is shown through a montage set to the infamous song Thank Heaven for Little Girls from the musical Gigi, which makes the whole thing really pretty creepy to say the least. When it's finally time for prom, Steve and Snot couldn't be more excited to lose their virginity tonight. But when Steve sees Glitter walking down the stairs fully grown, he can't help but be reminded of when she was just a little girl.
But seriously, sick trim, bro.
Both Steve and Snot get pretty uncomfortable about taking the girls to prom because it feels like they're going out with their own daughters. But since the girls are excited, they decide to just go as friends. But then just moments later, Steve comes back from grabbing corsages to find Snot heading to prom with Glitter in a limo carrying a bunch of condoms.
Snot, we said we weren't gonna sleep with our daughters! You didn't say I couldn't plow yours!
Yep, Snot is a total creep. Because he may have raised Honey, but he also knew Glitter as a child too. Meanwhile, Stan figures out that Glitter and Honey are both clones and has to kill them so he won't lose their job. So Stan shoots Honey right before going to prom for Glitter. Steve finds Glitter and Snot in the limo, with Snot trying to take off his trousers. And at first, Glitter's annoyed that Steve's interfering, but he tells her that she's worth more than being someone's conquest and should be treated like a beautiful young woman with respect and decency. But they don't get to celebrate for too long because Stan is closing in and coming after Glitter. Steve gets Glitter up to the roof to hide her from Stan, but then she suddenly collapses, telling him that she's reached the age of the girl that she was cloned from.
Because of you, I've seen things you wouldn't believe. Time to die.
And you really feel the pain of Steve's loss here. But yeah, that doesn't take away how Steve and Snot are basically taking care of infants with pretty sick intentions, which feels very close to grooming. And unfortunately, this isn't even the first time that Steve found himself in a very uncomfortable underage situation, when a girl a few years younger than him, called Reshna, kissed him.
When these come in, they're all yours.
But to the boys' credit, when it came to prom, they realised that what they originally intended to do was wrong.
I don't know if I can go through with this. I mean, I raised Glitter. She's practically my daughter.
Though Snot is not totally absolved because he decided to try and sleep with Glitter. It's hard to say if Glitter was ever part of Steve's romantic loves despite his original intentions, but I knew if I didn't include Glitter, you all would have a go at me about it. So anyway, let's quickly move on past this uncomfortableness and talk about Manic Pixie Dream Girl. So Steve returns looking for more traditional love in Season 9's independent movie. In this episode, Snot's dad dies. But since his dad left him years ago, he decides not to go to the funeral. and shocked by this, Steve and the others convince him to go to prove himself that he can actually feel grief. This results in a road trip, which makes the episode really feel like an indie movie from the 2000s.
We went out in search of a way to say goodbye to an absent father. But we found a lot more than that.
Shut up. You've been narrating for 4 hours.
And what's a classic 2000s movie trope? The manic pixie dream girl. So during the road trip, Steve meets a girl who's a dead ringer for Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. They get to know each other at a motel, and Steve is instantly smitten.
You're amazing.
I'm actually a total dork.
This mysterious, quirky, and incredibly hard to define girl captured Steve's heart, to the point where he's going to skip out on Snot's dad's funeral despite it being his idea in the first place. What's funny is that Steve falls for this girl without even finding out her name. In response, Steve gives her his name and reveals that he ditched his best friend's dad's funeral for her.
Wait a minute, you blew off your grieving friend to hang out in a hot tub with a complete stranger?
Even this random and unpredictable girl knows what Steve did wasn't cool and labels him as an emotional tourist, meaning that he's the kind of person who feeds off of other people's experiences to fill the void inside him. We last see the girl photographing a maid making a bed, which is very in tune with her quirky character. And on a side note, Steve does make it in time for the funeral but decides not to get out. Why? Well, what's the point in anything?
I could have gotten out of the truck and given Snot a hug. But what would have been the point?
But back to the manic pixie dream girl, and as cool and interesting as she was, there's a reason why she only appeared in this episode. The archetype she's playing only exists in the confines of a quirky independent movie from back in the day. And sure, there might be a few girls like her out there in real life, but they're probably not wrapped up in that same dreamy romantic glow that movies can pull off. If she showed up in a regular episode of American Dad, no one would really buy into it.
That I wear ice skates to weddings. It's hard to dance.
That's just the type of person I am.
Besides, she comes off as totally fake. Being quirky isn't a personality, it's just pretentious. 6 episodes later, in The Naughty Stewardess, Steve's next crush is Jenna, who is, yep, another girl way out of his league. And not only that, but she's got a boyfriend too. Steve and Jenna start talking because he volunteers to do her homework for her. Doing a girl's homework isn't going to make her fall for you. She's not into you, she just doesn't want to do her homework. Steve decides that he's gonna wait to tell her how he really feels. He figures he'll make his move after her boyfriend Figgers breaks up with her because his football coach told him to.
Did you do it? Yes, sir. Good. Because you players won't look up to me if you're having sex and I'm not.
Heartbroken, Jenna tells Steve that she wishes someone would ask her out to take the pain away, but he just stutters for the next minute and folds under the pressure. Later that day, after blowing a golden opportunity to ask Jenna out, Roger steps in with the wild idea to surgically swap places with Steve for a day so he can ask her out on Steve's behalf.
With your face on my face, I'll be dragging Jenna into the creek behind school and harvesting her organs in no time.
So when Roger rolls up to Jenna pretending to be Steve, she doesn't suspect a thing. Like I talked about in a previous video, Roger's got a pretty stacked love life, so you'd think he'd have some decent flirting skills here.
I battered my fish stick to your Candid in the yearbook. Now get over here and put this hand in your back pocket, facing your ass.
You'd figure that warrants a slap in the face, but Jenna is actually flattered. Anyway, the one flaw in the plan is that Roger ends up catching feelings for Jenna himself, so he decides to keep Steve's face on a little longer and takes her to the school dance. And honestly, they have a really great time. At one point, they even tell each other that they want to be together forever. But then Jenna drops a bomb saying that she's pregnant with Figgers' baby. And the second that Roger hears this, he's out. He backs off fast and happily gives Steve his face back. The only catch is he never tells Steve about the baby. Why? Because Steve had called his skin disgusting and Roger's really petty like that.
How's Jenna?
How's Jenna? Are you kidding?
Hey.
Steve went from being with his dream girl to being stuck in one of the worst situations imaginable.
You're pregnant?
Oh my God, he's got me! He's taking me up the stairs! What's at the top of the stairs?
And what's worse is that he feels obligated to support Jenna and her baby because no one else will. This isn't too long after Steve raised Glitter, so it does kind of make sense that he feels responsible. But then Roger comes up with a plan. He figures that they can get Jenna back with Figgis by using the same face swapping device that they used before, this time swapping faces with the football coach. And since the coach was the one who made Figgis break up with Jenna in the first place, they figure that if he tells Figgis to get back with her, he'll do it.
So, get back together with your girlfriend, raise your baby together, and, well, see you at practice. Oh, and don't look behind the door on your way out.
The next night, Jenna breaks up with Steve, and this time, he couldn't be happier.
Figgis came back, and he's better than you in every way.
Making Steve free from being tied down to Jenna and her baby for the rest of his life. Still, it is kind of a shame because Steve actually got to go out with one of the prettiest girls in school, and once again, some completely ridiculous twist managed to ruin it. But nonetheless, Steve definitely dodged a bullet. So, remember how I said that Steve has tried to get with some older women throughout the series? Well, this happens again in season 10's Roger Passes the Bar, when a gorgeous redhead called Charlotte knocks at the door.
I'm required to go door to door to notify all my new neighbors that I'm a registered sex offender.
And rather than staying away from her, Steve and his friends immediately come up with ways to get with her.
Oh my god, do you know what this means?
We're gonna get laid!
And as we all know by now, being a horny 14-year-old, Steve is always happy to ignore the problematic age gaps. So the guys come up with a story and head over to Charlotte's place saying that they accidentally lost something in her backyard. She brings them out back and they find that her backyard is a complete mess, so they offer to help clean it up.
Just you and your smooth, hungry hands rooting around in my backyard.
And now they're out there scrubbing her pool in nothing but their Speedos.
I really owe you guys. I'm gonna owe you so hard.
Next, the guys offer to remodel Charlotte's entire bedroom.
When you're done, come find me so I can show you my appreciation.
Once it's done, they show up at her place convinced that their big reward is waiting for them. But when they knock, a family there that they've never seen before opens the door and tells them that Charlotte sold them the house. As it turns out, Charlotte is a house flipper and she played them right from the start.
And I found that horn dog teenagers tend to work the hardest.
Stop doing that!
And when she said that she was going to turn them into men, she really meant that she helped them learn how to do house construction and establish lasting relationships with the county permit board. Weirdly enough, as she drives off, Steve starts narrating what happened to him and his friends, and it turns out they all ended up gay. I should have really mentioned that in my Every American Dad Future video, but hey ho, I digress. Anyway, so out of all the older love interests for Steve, Charlotte turned out to be the best for him, which is crazy to say because she's the one who pretended to be a registered SO. So yes, she used their horniness against them for physical labour, but at least she taught them a very valuable lesson. And hey, at least they can get a construction job after graduating. Later that season, Steve starts dating someone who ends up making him rethink his own gender in season 10's LGB Steve. So how did this happen? Well, the episode starts with Hayley enjoying a show of an all-girls roller derby match, and she wants to join their team because she believes that she'll fit right in with them. Steve gets curious about Hayley's roller derby tryout and tags along to the ring. And once they're out on the floor, it turns out that Steve is actually better at skating than she is. The all-girl team is open to recruiting him mostly because they assume that he's a girl. Part of it is the cut off jean shorts and part of it is his haircut.
They think I look like a girl. That's crazy.
Hayley decides to go along with it since Steve's skills on the track are her best shot at staying on the team too. Hayley convinces Steve to stay on the team by pointing out that he'll get to hang out and play with a lot of girls. So with his groin taped down and his new name Stevie, Steve throws himself into roller derby and has a blast. He ends up getting really close to one of the girls there too, a skater called Devon.
7 minutes in Devon. Good luck lasting that long.
You are adorbs.
And as Stevie, he feels more comfortable around girls, but Hayley steps in and puts a stop to any dating since hooking up with one of them could blow his cover. Still, Steve and Devon can't help themselves and kiss each other in the middle of the roller derby pile. And Devon, all excited, tells Hayley about her new crush.
We've already talked about opening a butcher shop in Park Slope.
What?
Well, there'd also be sandwiches, fresh ciabatta.
Hayley is pissed and tells Steve that he needs to come clean with Devin, but Steve reminds her that if the truth comes out, both of them will get kicked off the team. Still, Hayley feels like the truth has to come out, so she drops his pants in front of everyone.
He's a boy! We know!
Did you know?
Of course I did. You've had a boner for like 2 weeks.
But the Captain Iris says Steve might have male genitals, but he's really a girl trapped inside of a boy's body.
So I'm a lesbian inside a boy's body?
Steve processes all this by breaking out into a musical number.
Who am I between my legs? My sack's filled with sperm, but is my heart filled with eggs?
And Roger introduces him to a series of gender clarification tests, such as trying on dresses, heels, and a candlelit bath. But after some time, Steve realizes that he is a boy, thanks to seeing a really hot lady on a shampoo bottle.
Realized it felt right to have this penis. It felt right 5 times.
So Steve breaks the news to the roller derby team, but they're happy for him because he figured out who he is, even if it is the gender that he was born with. And for old time's sake, they want him to skate with them one last time and break out the tape. It's great that Devin supports Steve's decision, but it also means the end of their relationship, since, she's only into girls. But at least by the end of the episode, they stay friends, which is more than you can say for most of his love interests. Now, let's move on to Amy Reed. By season 11, Steve's new plan for getting with girls is to become a successful varsity athlete, more specifically on the water polo team. But the problem is that Steve isn't much of an athlete, so he doesn't make the team, at least not until Klaus steps in and starts controlling him all Ratatouille style, only this time, not the hair on his head, but his pubes.
It's not like I can go to tryouts with a fish hanging on my shorts.
Nothing wrong with the fish hanging in your shorts.
So it does sound like he grew plenty more of them after season 4. Steve quickly becomes a rising star in the polo team and meets a sports journalist called Amy Reed. And while Steve is on cloud 9, Klaus gets annoyed that Steve didn't give him credit for his success in the newspaper.
You wouldn't even be on the team if I wasn't steering you by the pubes.
And things get worse when Steve takes Amy to raging waters instead of him. And so Klaus becomes yet another Smith family member who sabotages Steve's budding romance, only this time by refusing to assist him in the water polo final. But Steve believes that he can handle it on his own, but he's quickly exposed as a terrible player who can barely swim. He burns all of his energy overthrowing the ball and ends up sinking to the bottom of the pool. In a daze underwater, Steve dreams about switching places with Klaus and finally realizes how much he took him for granted. Klaus ends up saving him and brings him back to the surface, and so Steve tries to tell everyone that Klaus was the one who helped him play so well. But the crowd just thinks he's giving credit to his junk.
This guy doesn't get the attention he deserves. Maybe because he's so small. I'm not a weirdo. I just have a fish in my shorts. He's been helping me get a jacket. Seemed like a good way to get to second base.
And that was the end of any chance Steve had with Amy. If Steve had just given Klaus the credit he deserved to begin with, maybe it would have worked out with Amy. Instead, he ended up looking like a weirdo stroking his junk in front of the whole school.
Thinking about switching schools.
Lolo Fuentes. In that same season, Steve goes from athletics to parties in the episode The Unincludeds. Now, I've already gone over into great detail about this in my future video, so I won't repeat myself now, but all I'll say is that in the future, Steve and Snot become rich and successful, but their newfound popularity messes with the timeline, so Steve promises not to cause any more damage. That is until he locks eyes with Lolo.
I've been homeschooled my entire life, and I've never socialized with peers before tonight. And I can't lie, I'm feeling some new feelings. May I hug you?
He initially tries to resist his urges, but he can't help but cave into his instincts. But Steve eventually realizes that his friendship is more important than girls, and so he and Snot humiliate themselves. Everyone is instantly weirded out and goes home, including Lolo Fuentes.
This is weird. I'm going home to spend the rest of high school with my father.
Steve may have lost the girl, but he and Snot regain their peak future selves in the process. Still, it is pretty frustrating that when a girl is attracted to Steve, he can't be with her because that will make him too cool and therefore drastically change his future. If only Steve and Lolo could spend some time together outside of the party without Snot getting in the way too. In the brief moment they shared, the passion was real, but seeing Lolo again won't be easy because her parents seem very strict and way too overprotective, practically keeping her locked inside the house. And after everything, it's doubtful Lolo will ever forget the image of Steve dancing naked burned into her memory. But while we're talking about Steve's future, it's worth bringing up his future relationships. In season 17's A Roger Story, he and Snot have a joint wedding and end up marrying two beautiful women. They even move next door to each other and start families. After everything Steve goes through in his turbulent love life, it is nice to think that he eventually finds real love and manages to settle down. But then again, this future might not even be canon. The show is full of alternate timelines and reality-bending episodes, so who knows what actually sticks.
Cool, you two are still best friends?
Actually, we're a couple now.
So seeing as this future might not even happen, let's stay in the present and discuss the Spring Harvest Dance Girl. In season 11's Gift Me Liberty, Steve is shopping for an outfit to get ready for the Spring Harvest Dance Festival when the store owner sells him an antique handkerchief. The owner tells him it belonged to Solomon Chanter's Labas, the most famous lady killer of the 1890s, who used handkerchiefs like this to charm the ladies. So Steve buys it, hoping it will help him talk to girls. And it actually works, because when Steve sees a beautiful girl sneeze, he offers her his handkerchief, and she's very impressed by this very, very gentlemanly gesture. They hit things off so well that she asks him to the harvest dance, and Steve immediately starts daydreaming about their future life together.
I would love to.
It looks like they're about to have a fun time at the dance, but when Steve sees her ride off on a motorcycle with a sexy bad boy called Wyatt, it turns out that Steve was just a decoy to get her parents' approval.
She's 14 and you're like 25, buddy. Good luck picking a movie that you both agree on.
You'll want to talk, Steve. How many older girls have you tried to date in the past? Right after she leaves, two girls come up to Steve and want him to do the same with them, acting as a fake boyfriend so their parents will approve, all while they actually date bad boys. And Steve figures why not, since he'll soon make enough cash to buy a motorcycle and become a sexy bad boy himself. And taking girls out so they can meet their boyfriends turns out to be a pretty sweet little business for Steve.
You're really going to enjoy our Steve Silver package. It's a drop-off, a picture, and I'll talk to your dad about model airplanes.
It looks like Steve found a very solid way to make a living as a boyfriend for hire, but too bad he can't actually date any of these girls for real. Things are going well until the winter harvest dance, when every girl Steve brought starts looking sick. Suddenly the CDC shows up and discovers the handkerchief Steve's been carrying all along is packed with germs, causing an outbreak of measles. Steve asks them why he didn't get sick, and they tell him it doesn't infect the sexually immature.
A class 5 virus going after a dweeb like you? Please.
My dude is getting rejected by measles now. Some might say that the girls got a bit of comeuppance for using Steve as their fake boyfriend, but at least they were paying him for it. And if Steve had stuck with the plan, it would have been fun to see him try and be that bad boy and get with the ladies. But knowing how things usually go for Steve, I think that experiment probably would have fallen apart too. So next up, we have Shannon. So if you thought the episode where Steve raised his prom date from birth was uncomfortable, this next story is somehow even creepier. In season 13's My Purity Ball and Chain, Steve is hornier than ever, but has moved on from girls to brooms. Okay, that was something I never needed to see. Anyway, Francine finds out that Steve's school is hosting an assembly teaching abstinence, so she asks Stan if he's given Steve the talk, which he hasn't because he still sees Steve as an innocent, sexless little boy. The assembly is predictably very corny, and Steve volunteered to go up on stage to play a virgin in a sketch because, well, he is one in real life. After the assembly, a girl named Shannon approaches Steve and asks if he wants to be the first boy to join her purity group, since she sees him as a committed virgin. The purity group is all about pledging to wait until marriage, kind of what like the Jonas Brothers did back in the day with their rings. As uncool as Shannon and the group might seem, Steve actually starts connecting with her over their shared love for comic book characters like Deathstroke from the DC comics.
You know he prefers to go by Deathstroke the Terminator, although his real name is Slade Wilson.
And despite her abstinence, Steve and Shannon develop some chemistry.
I brought my play. You probably don't want to read it. You were just being nice.
No, I'd love to.
You really don't have to.
Just give me the damn play!
Okay, I'll go get it.
Sheesh.
Meanwhile, we see why Stan hasn't given Steve the talk yet. It turns out the way his own dad handled it had left him traumatized.
Now, Stan, I hope you're taking notes, because this, oh Christ, looks like we struck oil. Hand me your blankie.
So when Steve is finally ready to give the talk, he sees the abstinence brochure, so he takes him to the rec centre instead. Now, Steve does like Shannon, but he's not exactly sold on the whole abstinence lifestyle yet. Still, it's probably a good thing that Stan brought him, because every other girl is paired with her dad. The setup is that each father is there to protect his daughter's purity, and the girls pledge themselves to their dads until they marry someone that their dad approves of. As weird as it is, Stan's all in. He doesn't have to give Steve the awkward sex talk, and he walks away with a very cool sword. And yeah, there's smothering fathers, and then there's this. It's safe to say that the creepiness factor speaks for itself.
So, it's kinda like you're dating your own dad.
It's exactly like that!
Steve reluctantly goes along with it, mostly because it means that he gets to spend more time with Shannon at the events. Stan starts to notice that Steve and Shannon really are starting to like each other, and once again, he ends up interfering. Only this time, he thinks he's completely in the right. After all, in his mind, he is the one dating Steve.
My son, will you make me the happiest daddy in the world and date me?
Still not creeped out yet? While they're setting up for the purity ball, Steve and Shannon find a quiet moment under the banner, and Shannon decides it's finally time to share how she really feels.
I wish you were my dad.
What?
She says this right before Stan exposes them holding hands, which draws an overblown reaction from everyone.
I wanted more!
Shannon's father Michael kicks them out of the group, and the one thing that Steve can do for forgiveness is go to sex aversion therapy camp. Yikes. Steve is mentally broken by the camp and becomes a dreary sexless boy, but it does get them back into the purity group, so there's that. At the ball, Steve can't bring himself to talk to Shannon. In fact, he can't look at any girl without getting physically sick. And that's when it finally hits Stan. He realises that he went way too far. In trying so hard not to mess up Steve the way his own father messed him up, he ended up doing even more damage. Stan goes from being the worst dad to Father of the Year when he gives Steve and Shannon some alone time in the maintenance closet. And while they're in there, he holds off the swarm of creepy dads with his sword like some kind of overprotective knight.
Their feelings for each other are natural. We should give them the information and the space to safely explore those feelings.
It's weirdly sweet in a very messed up kind of way. And Shannon morphs from looking like Axl Rose to herself to a broomstick, which means that Steve knows exactly what to do. We don't exactly know what Shannon and Steve did in the closet or how much time they had before Stan got injured by all the swords, but it does look like Steve actually scored here.
Thanks for making me horny again, Dad.
And I'm out.
And to back up this idea that Steve popped his cherry with Shannon, there's an official American Dad promo from the Facebook account that shows Steve's high school yearbook pictures, and she signed her picture, "Pop Goes the Cherry." So it may have taken 13 seasons and countless failed attempts, but Steve finally swiped his V card. Now, obviously losing your virginity so young isn't recommended at all, and doing in a closet while your dad is outside having a sword fight certainly isn't the most ideal condition. But at least it was consensual, and they liked each other, and hopefully they were safe. Either way, it is still weird that a 14-year-old character lost their virginity. But hey, this is American Dad, and you don't watch this show for moral lessons. Despite ending on very happy terms, Shannon hasn't appeared since, but you can imagine that her father would have done anything to make sure she doesn't see Steve ever again. Although I do hope that Shannon's moment with Steve sparked a rebellious side in her, where she can finally break away from her creepy ass father. If there's one takeaway from this episode, it's that while choosing abstinence can be valid and even a positive experience, pushing it to the extreme can be, well, it can end up doing more harm than good. In the end, a balanced, realistic approach to safe sex and honest conversations is what actually helps people, not purity pledges and swords. Out of all the girls that Steve has been with so far, Shannon is right up there with Akiko as one of the top love interests that I'd love to see return. Their relationship seemed like it had room to grow, and her character has more depth to explore. Plus, the fact that they have been each other's first adds a whole new layer of curiosity. Where could things go from here? For all we know, their romance could end up ridiculously wholesome or completely unhinged. Either way, there's definitely more of a story to tell here. So, with Shannon out of the picture, Steve sets his sights on someone new while on a cruise. Here Steve meets a girl at the teen hangout zone who expects him to bring his A-game for a dance contest.
She's expecting me to perform in the dance contest, and I'm terrible!
But luckily, he has a dance instructor called Isabella to help. Isabella is posing as Steve's mum on the cruise because Francine was arrested for supposedly abducting Bonnie Ramirez, aka Roger in one of his disguises. Roger set Francine up after she called his character performances washed up, but since they need Francine to get on the cruise, they had Isabella step in after seeing her portray Francine in a reenactment on a true crime show. Isabella teaches Steve all her best moves, and they totally crush their performance, but the only problem is that since she's pretending to be his mum, their dancing comes off way more erotic than it probably should.
What you just did on the dance floor with your mom
Yeah?
is exactly why I want to have a son one day!
Yeah, luckily for Steve, this girl is freaky. And Isabella continues to be pretend mum of the year by instructing Steve to put his coat on the girl. So it looks like Steve is about to get lucky again, right? Well, no, because this is Steve we're talking about here.
I got robbed by a 30-year-old Romanian stowaway pretending to be a teenage girl. But guess who got a kiss first?
Yep, that was a twist I definitely didn't see coming. Steve is the kind of teenage boy who would be gullible enough to fall into this kind of trap, getting all this unexpected attention from someone, but it's just being played for money. Though it sounds like Steve is just happy to get a kiss out of it. So, how did the Smiths reward Isabella for all her help? By swapping her and Francine in prison.
What's going on?
Time's up. Come on.
I didn't do anything!
And finally, we come to Ali. Despite his long history of chasing hookups, this is one of the rare times where Steve is genuinely looking for something real, aka a bona fide true love. In season 17's Smushed a Love Story, Steve is wide awake in the middle of the night, buzzing with excitement for the next morning, and his parents are even more excited. And why are they all excited? Because Steve is going on a 2-night trip to Philadelphia and he's planning on asking out his newest crush, Milk Girl.
Francine, please try to be cool.
It is really cute how they're all excited for Steve. It's kind of wholesome.
Tell us again about Milk Girl.
Again?
Give us the goss, boss!
So the next morning, Steve shows up with a backpack full of milk, ready to sit next to Milk Girl, but her best friend shoves him to the back, and look, there's Manic Pixie Girl. I don't know why he doesn't choose to chat to her again, but I guess he knew he blew it the first time. So Steve sits next to a girl called Ali and complains about his failed plan to get Milk Girl to fall in love with him, but Ali says that true love doesn't exist.
What's her name?
What's in a name? Shakespeare.
So you don't even know her name.
You're distracting me.
Since he can't speak to Milk Girl on the bus, he passes down a note asking for a date instead. And despite embarrassing himself by eating a spicy pepper, she accepts.
Love conquers all!
So Steve has a date with Milk Girl on top of a Philadelphia skyscraper, and it goes off without a hitch.
And I know I don't know you, but I feel like I do.
But as it turns out, he does kind of know her.
I'm Reese Witherspoon.
What?
Yep, Hollywood actress Reese Witherspoon explains that she went undercover as a high school student to prove that she could play a 17-year-old in a movie.
Do you even like milk?
I hate milk. I'm just a really good actress.
You know what, I don't blame Steve for this one. If Reese Witherspoon was in my high school, I'd definitely have a crush on her too. Still, that doesn't mean love is off the table in the city of brotherly love, because during the trip, Principal Lewis makes an announcement in that he needs help finding his friend Marty. So he pairs everyone up with the person that they're sitting next to, and sitting right next to Steve is none other than Ali. So Steve and Ali travel through the city together and their opposite personalities keep clashing. Ali calls Steve for being overly dramatic, saying he acts like everything matters when in her opinion, nothing really does. It's not what Steve wants to hear, but it plants a seed of doubt. Maybe love isn't real after all. When they stop at a spicy restaurant to grab a bite to eat, Ali spots her ex-boyfriend, and she starts getting emotional. To get her out of this painful situation, Steve decides to grab a Carolina Reaper pepper, and it's one of the hottest peppers out there, and he eats it. But Ali knows that Steve ate the pepper to help her.
I know you ate that pepper for me.
You think I liquefied my insides just to get you out of that restaurant?
So she puts her foxy coat over his shoulders and shares a passionate kiss with him. Later that night, after Steve breaks the news to his folks about why things didn't work out with Milk Girl, they don't take it too well.
The hell do you mean gone?
How could you let this happen, Steven? We were going to invite her to Christmas!
I can't play all of this obviously because I'm limited to 6 seconds, but their obsession with Milk Girl is so freaking funny. Anyway, Ali knocks on the door and brings up the kiss, and Steve's ready to say that it was fantastic, but Ali cuts him off and says it was a mistake.
Obviously didn't mean anything, so I think we should just forget it. Plus, it was unprofessional. You agree.
Watch this, Lise. You can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
But Steve doesn't take this letdown well and runs off crying, only to be immediately crushed between a car and a bus. And sure, his body is completely mangled, but at least he got Ali to admit her true feelings.
I'm not going to the hospital until you tell me how you feel about me.
Fine, I like you.
So it looks like Steve finally found true love. Yep, no. This is Steve we're talking about, because by the end of the episode we get this interview between them and Ali points out that she doesn't really like him.
You were smooshed between a bus and a car.
I was.
You were refusing medical attention.
She felt like she had no choice but to say it.
We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Whether or not Ali actually wants to be more than just a friend is open to interpretation. Like, is she just trying to hide her true feelings again? Or did she just tell him what he wanted to hear? In that, she doesn't really fancy him. This episode aired a few years ago, so it is plausible that she could return. That's if actress Patty Harrison is willing to come back. So out of all of Steve's love interests, I'd definitely put Ali right up there with Akiko and Shannon as the top 3 that I'd like to see come back and rekindle things with Steve, but maybe not all at once. Unless they did want to go full on sitcom and have some kind of double date or love triangle going on, which honestly could be pretty funny. And speaking of Patty Harrison voicing Ali, that's another point that I haven't mentioned yet. So a lot of Steve's love interests have been voiced by some pretty big name actresses, including Noel Wells as Shannon, Lizzie Kaplan as Debbie, Kristen Chenoweth as Devon, and plenty of other stars. A lot of his love interests are voiced by actresses with very busy schedules and don't have time to come back for more episodes. But of course, they could always recast that role for a sound-alike if they are committed to have a character come back. So out of all of these women, who should Steve end up with? Honestly, none of them. He is only 14. And how many people actually stay with their high school sweetheart forever? Let's face it, hardly anyone. Like anyone, he has a lot of growing up to do before he settles down and finds the one. He's got time. But as of right now, Steve Smith continues his never-ending pursuit of love, sex, and a bit of boob. But as we've explored over these past 20 seasons, Steve has packed 2 decades worth of heartbreaks and triumphs with girls at just the age of 14. And that's all the girls from Steve's long, frustrating, but maybe hopeful love life. Who do you think should end up with Steve? Leave your answer down below in the comments.